I was 18 years old, the firstborn son of Count Aldrich Cairn, standing at the edge of the training field while my 8-year-old brother showed the entire household what our bloodline could do. Tio put out one small hand. The sand in the pit came up to meet it. Grains lifted, turned in the air, and stacked themselves into a castle as tall as he was. Battlements, a gate, a little flag made of sand on top. Topic. The kid was 8. The servants lost their minds. Truly the blood of Cairn. Then my father turned to me. Your turn. Every head in that courtyard swung around. Tio looked up at me with his whole face shining. Big brother will do better. He would not. I walked down into the pit, put out my hand, and concentrated until my arms shook. Not one grain moved. 3 weeks later, I grew 4 iron cannons out of raw ore with these hands and buried 200 raiders in a canyon. That afternoon, I could not lift a single grain of sand. The sandpit was dry that morning. The whole house came to watch, jesting on the Spence. It's so. Servants packed the north gallery 3 deep. My brother Tio knelt at the lip of the pit. He had his sleeves shoved past his elbows. Number 8 years old. He had lost a front tooth that spring, and he still whistled uncertain words. He put both palms flat on the sand and breathed out. The pit moved, came up slow at first, a swelling under the surface. Then it found its shape. A ring wall climbed to hip height in under 30 seconds. 4 towers pushed up behind it where a moment before there had been none. Sand ran in threads up the tower walls. The way water runs down glass, only backwards. The master of the pit stopped writing to watch. He had graded Cairn children for 20 years, and he had put his stylus down. Look at the gate, Tio said. I did the hinges. There were hinges, and there were hinges. 2 sand knuckles the size of my thumbnail, and he had spent maybe 10 of his 60 seconds on them. The gallery clapped. My mother clapped hardest, both hands up beside her cheek. Every Cairn in that gallery had done the same thing at that age or younger. The house had commanded stone for 1,000 years. A boy raising a castle out of sand was not a miracle here. It was a receipt. My father stood at the rail with his arms folded. Count Aldrich Cairn was a wide man who never hurried. He looked at the castle just long enough to count the towers. 4. He nodded once. Rowan, he said, your turn. Hao spun around on his knees. He's gonna do one twice as big, he shouted. He shouted it to the gallery, to the sky, to everyone. Watch. He's been saving it. I loved him for that. I have never decided whether it made the next part better or worse. I walked down into the pit. The sand was warm through my boots. It gave under my heel with every step. I stopped in the middle, where Teo's castle had stood. 2 servants had already flattened it back to level with the board. I put both hands out over the surface, palms down, fingers spread, exactly the way the tutors had shown me for 11 years. Then I pushed. I do not know a better word for it. There is no muscle to it. You reach for something behind your ribs and you lean on it. Every Cairn describes it the same way. Every Cairn finds it there. I found nothing. I pushed anyway. I kept my arms up. I kept my breathing even. I pushed at a thing that was not there. Sweat came up along my hairline and ran down in front of my ear. 20 seconds spent and not one grain had shifted. 30 seconds, and the only thing that had risen off that pit was my own sweat. At 40 seconds, my shoulders started shaking and my arms dropped an inch on their own. Somebody in the gallery coughed. Somebody else laughed and was hushed. That was worse. The clapping had gone from 100 pairs of hands to nothing in the space of 3 breaths, and the difference was all mine. I gave it the full 60. Not one grain moved. The surface stayed as flat as the board had left it, and the only mark on it by the end was the heel print I had walked in with. My father turned his back with 10 seconds still on the count. That is enough, he said to the master of the pit. The testing is finished. My mother said, Aldrich, he is only... He raised one hand and she stopped. Just the hand. He did not turn around to do it. The gallery emptied in that particular quiet that is not quiet at all. Nobody speaks above the stairs. Everybody speaks below them. Tio stayed. He came down into the pit and stood beside me. After a while, he took my sleeve in his fist. Neither of us said anything about the hinges. 11 years of tutors, 4 hours a week, and I had earned exactly nothing out of them. That was the last hour anyone in Cairnhold treated the question as open. I will say the part nobody in that house ever knew, and I will say it once. I did not begin in this body. If you also I woke in it 18 years ago with another life already behind my eyes. Full one. Longer than the one I have lived here. I have never told a living soul. It bought me nothing that afternoon. UNS. Whatever I carried across with me, it was not the thing that moved stone. Dinner was in the long hall under the iron candle rings. They hang low there, 6 of them. The light comes down in flat circles. The middle of the table is bright and the ends are not. I sat at my father's right, where the firstborn sits. Heo sat opposite me and would not eat. My father did not look at me once. Not when I sat. Not when the meat came. He talked to Halden about the horses. He talked to my mother about a shipment. He talked to the empty air about the weather in the north. His eyes went around me the way a cart goes around a stone in the road. Then he set down his cup. The law of this house has not changed in 9 generations, he said. No awakened bloodline, no title, no land. He set it to the table. Everyone at that table already knew it. He was not teaching us anything. He was doing something to a person sitting 3 feet from him. He did it with a rule instead of a knife. The rule could not argue back, and I could. Halden's jaw set. My mother's hand went white around her fork. I had known this was coming since I was 11. I had spent 7 years deciding what I would do in that exact chair. I stood up. Then I released my claim, I said. All of it. All of it. Birth order, inheritance, the succession, the seat. I give it up tonight, and I give it up willingly. Nobody here has to take it off me. 40 forks stopped at once. One of them dropped, and nobody down that whole table reached for it. My father looked at me then. First time all night. He is a hard man to surprise. I had been building that sentence for 7 years. I watched it land. I know. It was worth every one of them. He was quiet a long moment. Sit down, he said. I would rather stand. Bored. Then hear it standing. He turned his cup a quarter turn on the wood. 2 doors. Behind the first, you stay. You take a knight's title. You run the family workshops and the trade routes. You keep this roof, and you never hold land in your own name. Behind the second, you take a frontier writ from the crown. You go north. You drop the name Cairn at the gate. I want to be fair about what he offered. 3 years earlier, the workshops had been the 4th line down in the ledger. Under my hand, the income had tripled, and the line had climbed to the top of the page, above the grain and above the horses. His accountant knew that. His accountant told him everything. The first door was not charity. It was a man trying to keep the thing he had just finished throwing away. The writ, I said. My mother came out of her chair fast. Her sleeve took the plate in front of her and 2 cups off the table with it. All 3 went across the flagstones, and all 3 were left where they landed. 40 people in that hall, and not one of them bent down. Understand the terms, my father said. His voice did not change at all. You go with no name. No protection from this house. No claim on its resources, its men, its coin, or its allies. If you starve out there, you starve as nobody. I understand the terms. Then it is done. My mother reached him by then. She put her face into his shoulder and sobbed like something had come loose in her chest. He held her with one arm and looked at the far wall. He did not comfort her. He did not let go either. The cruelest thing my father did that night, he did to her. Tio found me in the corridor an hour later. He came through the skirts of 2 waiting women. He got a fist into my palm and pushed something into it. It was a stone, black, smooth, about the size of a plum pit, warm from his pocket. It's lucky, he said. It keeps you safe. It's the best one I have. Where did you get it? He shrugged the way children shrug at a boring question. Keep it on you, he said. Not in the bag, on you. He owned 4 things he cared about, and he had just spent the best one on a brother with nothing. I told him I would keep it. I put it in my shirt without looking at it twice. I ruffled his hair. I thought about the hinges on his gate. I want that on the record. I thought it was a pebble a child liked. We left at dawn. The gate at Cairn is a stone arch. The north road runs straight out of it into gray fields. There is no cover for 2 miles, so the whole castle can watch you go as long as it wants to. It wanted to. Halden was mounted on the left and Piers on the right. 2 knights sworn to my father, both riding out anyway. 20 soldiers formed up behind them. 100 farmers came out behind that with their families, and the yard went from empty to 230 people in under an hour. Seed and tools and cookpots roped down under canvas. 11 carts. Every one of them loaded on my coin and not one of them on his. My mother came out into the cold with a bundle of oiled cloth in her arms. She unwrapped it herself. She buckled the belt around me herself. Her hands were steady doing it, which was somehow the hardest part of the morning. One steel longsword, hers, 20 years on her hip, and it left her side in one motion, and Halden went stiff in the saddle when he saw which blade it was. It has been through more than you have, she said. Do not be gentle with it. I won't. Rowan, she held the buckle a second longer. Come back with land. I rode north with 2 knights, 20 soldiers, 100 farmers, 1 steel longsword, and 1 black stone. My claim on House Cairn had gone from everything to nothing in a single evening, and I had signed for it myself. Not one thing in that column belonged to my father. A month of road looks like 3 things in memory. Mud first, wheel ruts filling in behind us, oxen hauling against the suction, farmers walking beside the carts because riding was slower than walking, then the fields thinning out. Barley to rye, rye to stubble, stubble to whatever grows where nobody bothers. Then the last boundary stone of House Cairn went past the cartwheels on my left. Somebody had scraped the moss off its face that spring. Nobody would scrape it again for us. I did not look back at it. Terry's did, twice. He had grown up 2 valleys east of that stone. He said nothing about it, and he looked anyway. We camped that night on a ridge with the carts in a ring and the fire at the center. The tree line stood about 40 paces off. Halden sat with his back to a wheel and dragged a whetstone down his blade in long, unhurried passes. Tomorrow's canyon, he said. It is not a peaceful road, my lord, and it never has been. He had run 4 caravans through that canyon in his life, and only 2 had come out whole. He told me the number flat, the way a man reads a butcher's bill. And the other 2 came out. He went back to the stone. Halden had been my father's man for 30 years, and he had a way of finishing a subject by not finishing a sentence. The whistle came out of the dark an hour later. Not a bird, too flat, too long, and answered twice. They came out of the tree line all at once. Wolves, gray and low. They moved in that loose spread that means the thing is hunted in a group of 4. Farmers scattered under the carts. A woman was screaming a child's name. Halden was up before I was. Piers had 6 spears in the western gap and then 11, and the gap went from open to shut in under 4 seconds, shields locked, spears down. The Alpha came last. It stood a head above the others at the shoulder, and it did not hurry either. Hold the line, Halden shouted. Nothing gets past to the carts. I drew my mother's sword. My lord, get behind me. I have trained with a blade since I was 6, I said. 11 years of it, every morning, and not one of those mornings was this. That is not the same thing. No, it isn't. I stepped out past the shields. The Alpha saw the movement and came for it. There is a great deal I could say about that half second. None of it happened in my head at the time. It came in low and rose at the last stride, both forelegs up and out, jaws wide. I turned my hips. I let the claws come down onto the flat of the steel and take the weight there. The shock ran up to my elbow and my heel slid back 4 inches in the dirt. Then I brought the edge up under its jaw and pulled through. It opened, all the way across. The body carried past me and hit the dirt and slid. I went down on one knee. My arm was shaking, my lungs were burning, and there was blood down my whole left side. Then the stone went hot, hot enough to burn. I got a hand inside my shirt and it seared my palm. I pulled it out into the firelight. There were veins crawling across it, dark red, moving. They spread out from the center of the stone like frost going the wrong direction. Gray mist came off the dead Alpha. It lifted out of the whole length of the body, thin as breath on a cold morning. It did not drift. Ah! It bent toward my hand. It poured into the stone. The stone drank it, and the veins pulsed once with every mouthful. Then it stopped. I stood up without meaning to. A full day of road and a full night of fear dropped off me in the space of 2 breaths. There was a claw cut down my forearm that I had not felt happen. I watched the edges of it pull closed and go pink and go quiet. 4 seconds, maybe 5, and a wound that would have cost me 10 days was gone. The arm that had been shaking 10 seconds earlier now brought the long sword up one-handed and held it level. I do not mean I felt braver. I mean the arm was stronger. I put the stone back in my shirt before Halden reached me. He reached me 3 strides later. He looked at the Alpha, then at the blood, then at my face for a long moment. A boy who has just killed his first thing should be on his hands and knees. I was standing straight and breathing through my nose. He did not ask. That was the first time Halden chose not to ask me something. Bring a torch, he said instead. He crouched at the alpha's foreleg and lifted it. There were spurs at the joint, curved in yellow-white, breaking out through the fur. A plain wolf does not grow those. Half turned, give it another year and that one carries a crystal core in its chest, and then I do not let you within 50 paces of it. What is a crystal core? What they carry once they finish becoming magic beasts. He wiped his hands on his thigh. Nobles pay stupid money for them. I have never held one. 11 wolves down, 2 farmers cut open, both walking by morning, and not one of the 122 we had brought out of Cairn left in that dirt. Piers walked the ring afterward with a lamp and counted heads out loud. He counted them twice. He had been given the roll of names at Cairn, and he took it as a personal debt. 122, he said. All of them. He let the lamp down and then lifted it again. That was night 1, my lord. There are about 300 left. In my tent, I sat with my legs crossed and my eyes shut. I did the thing the tutors made me do every morning for 11 years. Look inward. Find the flow. For 18 years, there had been nothing there. A gray blank. 18 years. And now there were streams. Faint red ones. Thin as thread. They moved through my chest and down my arms in a pattern I had no name for. I could see them. I reached for one, and my hand went through it like a hand through smoke. I reached again. 9 tries by my own count, and I had gained exactly nothing off any of them. I sat there until the fire outside burned down. I would not have traded that hour for the whole county. 18 years of nothing. Then that. The canyon came the next afternoon. Rock walls close on both sides. The road ran as a stone floor between them. The light came down in a strip. The mountain cat was on the left wall about 30 feet up, flat against the rock. One of the archers saw it and drew. Down, I said. Bows down, my lord, down. I walked out into the middle of the road alone and stood there and let it look at me. 20 soldiers behind me with nothing in their hands, on my order. It came off the wall in one drop. I stepped inside the arc of it. It took a shallow line across my shoulder for the privilege. I put the sword up through the ribs behind the foreleg. It died on the stone 6 feet from where it landed. Then I waited. I stood over that carcass with my hand inside my shirt for a full minute. The stone stayed cold, black and smooth and cold, the same pebble Tio had pushed into my palm. No mist came off the cat. Nothing at all came off the cat. One kill the night before had fed that stone until its veins ran red. One kill now had left it as cold as a river pebble, and the difference was lying at my feet. I checked the legs anyway, smooth joints, no spurs. Nothing yellow, nothing breaking through the fur. Just a big, hungry animal that had been sitting on a rock. So there it was. The stone does not care that I killed something. It does not want blood. It does not want meat. It only wakes for the ones that have started turning into something else. The cut on my shoulder was still open an hour later. Nothing closed it. 2 kills, and only one of them had bought me anything. I'd killed that cat to find that out. I told nobody, including the 2 men who would have died for me on that road. We camped at the canyon exit on open ground. Somebody put a spit over the coals. Colden turned the meat and complained about the salt, twice. I let a long silence go by. Then I asked him the kind of idle question a bored young man asks. How does anyone actually get strong, truly strong, Halden strong? He laughed at that. 2 roads, my lord, only 2. You are born into a bloodline and it wakes, which is luck and nothing else. Or you break your body for 30 or 40 years until it hands you something back. And that is all of them? That is all of them. I took the second. It cost me both knees and a marriage. Would you take it again? Asked my knees. He turned the meat again, and that was the end of it. 2 sentences of the world and no more, from a man who did not think he was telling me anything. I lay awake a while after. My bloodline had woken enough to be seen and not enough to be held. 2 roads out of this, and at 18 I had already reached the age where only the slow one was left. 30 or 40 years of broken knees would put me past 60 before I gained a thing worth having. Neither road was mine. I had a third thing in my shirt, and I had no idea yet how big it could open its mouth. We rode on from the canyon at first light, and the grass changed inside a mile. Green went to a dead gray-brown, not burnt, just finished. It stood knee-high, and it did not bend much in the wind, and under a white sky with no edge to it, the whole plain looked like something drawn and then rubbed out. The carts made the only noise. Nobody talked. Not for an hour. 122 people. no name over them, no wall in front of him. Piers rode with a leather cuff strapped over his left forearm. He had kept hunting falcons since he was a boy. He had brought 2 of them out with us, hooded in a wicker cage on the 3rd cart. He flew one at every dawn and let it climb until it was a speck. "Why bother?" Halden asked him once. "You cannot read a bird." "I can read this one," Piers said. "A bird sees a day of road in a quarter hour. You see the back of an ox." The bird came down onto his cuff a little after midday. He read the jesses and the way it was breathing and something else I could not see. Then he stood in his stirrups. "Flame lion," he shouted. "Crimson, coming down our line of march." Halden was already turning his horse. "How far?" "Close. It is running." "Wheel the carts. Ring them. Now." The carts came around in a ragged circle and slammed together. 11 carts, and the ring shut in under a minute with the last 2 dragged in by hand. Farmers went flat under the axles. Mothers pulled children in against their chests. Archers climbed the crates and knelt on the roped canvas. "Children under the beds," Piers was shouting. "Not behind them, under." 20 soldiers made a wall of shields inside the ring, facing out. I stood in the middle of them with my mother's sword in my hand and nothing useful to do with it. I felt the heat before I saw the thing. It came out of the gray grass at a dead run. It stood as high as a horse at the shoulder. Its mane was on fire, actually burning red and gold, laid flat back against its neck by its own speed. The grass charred black under each paw. It left a printed trail of soot behind it, 4 lines of it straight at us. It stopped 40 paces out and opened its mouth. Orange light built at the back of its throat. I could see the shape of it swelling, the way a forge swells when you work the bellows. Somebody screamed, somebody prayed. "Down," Halden roared. "Everyone down." It spat. The thing that came out was the size of a cart. Halden walked out to meet it. He did not run. He unbuckled his breastplate as he went and dropped it in the grass. Then the pauldrons. Then the greaves. I remember thinking that the old man had lost his mind at the very end of his life. "Halden, stay in the ring, my lord." Then he swelled. That is the only word for it. His shoulders went out. Oof! His back went up. His arms thickened until the sleeves tore off at the seam. He went from a man half a head shorter than me to nearly 3 meters of him in about 6 seconds, and his boots split open around his feet on the way. Ancient runes crawled up out of his skin as he grew. They came along his forearms, over his collarbones, up the sides of his neck. Dark and moving. They reached his throat and stopped, and the sword in his fist now sat 2 full feet further from his body than any man on that plane could have held it. A quiet old man turning into something the size of a barn. Behind me, a soldier dropped his shield and did not pick it up. I brought the sword down through the fireball in one swing. One fireball went to 2 halves in the space of that swing. The way a tide is pulled open down the middle. The halves burned past the wagon ring on either side, close enough that the canvas smoked and a woman's hair caught and was slapped out. Not one cart was lost. Then he charged into the fire. The lion was still pouring at him. I watched a man run through a torrent of flame. He crossed 40 paces in 9 strides and left craters behind him. 9 of them, each one deep enough to put a boot in. The lion gave ground. It actually backed up. It actually retreated from him. Claw met blade 11 times in the space of a few breaths, and by the 11th the lion had lost 4 paces and never got back. The sound was wrong for a sword. It was a smith's sound. The lion's mane went up entirely then. The whole head became fire. It came off the ground for his throat. Halden threw the sword away. He threw it. I saw it go end over end into the grass. Then he put both hands up. 2 burning paws, one in each fist, caught in midair and held there. Every tendon in his arms stood out like cable. He turned at the hips. The slam that followed dropped dust off the canvas of carts standing 40 paces away, and 3 archers on those carts went down on their knees from the shake of it. It tried to rise. He picked the blade back up, walked 3 steps, and put it through the heart. Then it was quiet. The grass burned in patches. Holden stood over the body with his chest heaving and steam coming off his shoulders. Behind me, one of the soldiers said, "He never told us." "No," Piers said, "he would not." That was the moment the whole column understood what my father had actually sent out with us. He had done it while telling me to my face that I had no protection from his house. Then the stone woke up. I felt it before I understood it. Not warm this time. It went so hot inside my shirt that I dragged it out with both hands and nearly dropped it. The veins across its face went from dark red to live crimson in one heartbeat, and they were moving twice as fast as they had moved over the wolf. The lion came apart. Not the body. The body lay in the black grass exactly as it had fallen. What lifted out of it was light, not the thin gray breath that had come off the wolf. This was crimson, pouring up out of the corpse in a column. It bent across 40 paces of open ground toward my hands. Straight at me. It did not stop. It went on and on. Every scrap of what that animal had been came out of it. I looked around at the ring of faces. Piers with his mouth open. 2 archers turned the wrong way. Not one of them was looking at the light. Nobody could see it. Nobody has ever been able to see it but me. Then my feet left the ground. I want to be honest about this. Since I was 11, I had planned and hedged and arranged. I had built a life where nothing could ever be done to me again. That afternoon, something happened to me that I did not plan and could not stop. The first clean feeling I had in years was terror. I went up, 2 feet, then 6, and 120 faces tipped back to follow me. My arms went out on their own. The crimson kept coming. Golden reached me first. He was still 3 meters of him. He put a hand out to take my ankle and something threw him. No flash, no sound. Nothing to see at all. His arm stopped 6 inches short of my boot, and 3 meters of awakened night dropped backwards into the grass and skidded on his shoulder. "My lord," he shouted, "Rowan!" The strongest man on that plain, flat on his back in front of 120 people because he tried to touch a boy. That is the exact measure of what was around me. It bounced him, then it went into me. 18 years, those red threads had run through my chest where nobody could reach them. The lion hit them like a river hitting a dry channel. They filled, they swelled, thread to cord in about 4 seconds, then wider. My bones cracked. I heard them, not breaking. I know the difference now. It was a long series of splitting sounds inside my arms and ribs and thighs. Then the pieces pulled back together thicker than they had been. 10 seconds, and my forearm had rebuilt itself twice in the air in front of my face and gained a thumb's width both times. Then the runes came. They came up out of me the way they had come up out of Halden, along the arms first, then the chest, then the throat. But they were not his. His were thick and simple and old. Mine came in finer than his, layer inside layer, patterns folding through patterns. Where he carried 1 line, I now carried 3, and they spread faster than my eyes could follow them. Halden was on his knees in the grass by then, staring up at me. He had worn his own runes for 30 years, and he was counting mine. Impossible! Piers had come to stand beside him. He did not kneel, and he did not run. "Is he dying?" Piers said. "Aye!" "No," Halden said. "That is not a man dying." I hung there over the wagon ring with light coming out of my skin, and I could not have told you my own name. My count went from 1 beast to 2 that afternoon, and the second one had taken my feet off the earth for the first time in my life. Whatever was in my hand, it was not a lucky charm, and an 8-year-old had put it there. The first thing I heard was the scabbards, 20 of them at once. That dry, rasping shriek a blade makes coming out fast. 20 swords left 20 sheaths, and not one hand had gone near a belt. Then everything else. The good pots came up off the fire. The fire came with them for a second, in strings, the tripod, the chain, every dagger on every belt, every buckle that was not sewn down, the iron banding off a broken crate, the horseshoes still nailed to the horses, and 2 of those horses dropped onto their sides screaming. A soldier's helmet lifted straight off his head and left his hair standing. All of it, everything made of metal inside that ring. It rose to me. It rose to me. It came up to where I hung with my arms out. Then it began to turn. Slowly at first. Then it found a rhythm. 60-odd pieces of iron and steel now going around me at the height of a man's shoulder, and not one of them ever touched another. Sword after pot after nail. Each piece kept its distance from the next as though somebody had measured it. 120 people stood in the grass under it. Not one of them left the ring. Nobody ran. That is the part I still think about. Not one of those farmers ran. The cyclone widened while they watched. A plowshare came up off the second cart and took its place in the ring. Then a bucket hoop. Then a box of nails, and the nails came out of the box one at a time and spread themselves along the outside edge until the whole thing had a rim of them. A woman below me put her hand flat over her son's eyes and then took it away again because she wanted him to see it. Something happened behind my eyes then. There is no better way to say it. I felt the surface of every piece of that metal at once. The way you feel the two hands at the ends of your own arms without looking at them. The sword on my left had a nick in the edge, 4 inches from the point. The pot had burn scale on the bottom. I knew both of those things without seeing either one. Then my pupils changed. I did not know it in the moment. Piers told me after. Gold, he said. Solid gold, my lord. No white, nothing else. The light went out of me and I came down onto my heels in the flattened grass. And every piece of metal in the air dropped at the same instant. Not one after another. Together, 60 pieces of iron hit the ground on the same beat and made one flat crash out of it. Steel on crate lids, the tripod coming down across the firestones. Then a silence with a ringing edge on it. I stood in the middle of that silence and I could still feel all of it. The blade near my boot, the banding by the third cart, the horseshoes. Not the horses, not the crates, not the wood, not the canvas, not the men. The metal, only the metal, and only out to about the edge of the wagon ring. I walked it out to find the edge, counting paces, while the whole field watched me pace a burnt circle like a madman. There was a dropped horseshoe out past the last cart. I could feel it at 31 steps. At the 32nd, I lost it, and it went out like a snuffed candle. I stepped back, and it came again. 10 meters. That was the wall. A nail at 10 came to me. At 11, there was only dead air left. I walked the circle twice more to be sure of it. Halden followed me the second time with a dagger held out at arm's length, and I called the moment it went dead, and he stopped where I told him and looked down at his own boots. He had covered 10 meters exactly. He measured it again with his stride and got the same answer and said nothing at all. "What are you doing, my lord?" Piers said, measuring. "I earn call," I said. I said it out loud, to nobody in particular. It was the first word that came and it was the right one. I have never once wanted a different word for it. "My lord," one of the soldiers said, "I earn call. That is what it is called. It did not have a name until a minute ago." Halden went down on one knee. Gauze. He was back to his own size by then. Ordinary. Gray. Half his clothes gone and blood dried in his beard. He put his fist against his chest and went down in the dirt in front of me. He did it fast, like a man who had been waiting for permission. Then Piers. Then the twinning. It went out from the center in a wave, rank by rank. The farmers behind them did not know the form. They simply knelt where they stood with their hats in their hands. 2 knights first, then 20 soldiers, and the count reached 120 before one man in that field was left standing. Halden had outranked me that morning. He had been sent along to guard the disinherited boy. That is the errand you give an old knight when you want him out of the way. "Get up," I said. "No, my lord. Halden, I have served your house for 30 years. He did not lift his head. "I have never seen that. Let me have the minute." I let him have the minute. And no, it cost me nothing, and it bought me the only thing out here that money cannot. Then I wanted a sword, and one came. I did not reach. I did not point. A blade lying in the grass 8 paces off came up off the ground. It turned once in the air. It set its grip into my palm like something coming home. One of the soldiers' swords. Plain and cheap, the guard pitted with rust. I closed my fist around the edge of it. I want to be clear that I did this deliberately, and that I did not know it would work. I put my bare hand on the sharp side of a sword and squeezed until my knuckles went white. 10 seconds spent crushing a live edge, and it drew not one bead of blood. The steel sat against my skin like the flat of a spoon. Somebody in the kneeling ranks made a small sound. Piers was still down on one knee, and Piers is the man who says the true thing at the wrong moment, and he could not hold it. "My lord, that is not stone." "No. Your house commands stone. Every cairn for 1,000 years. That is not the family power at all." He heard himself and went white. The whole field heard him. I did not answer him with an argument. Arguments are what you give someone when you have nothing to show. I turned the blade over in my palm and I asked the steel to soften. It ran. No forge, no coals, no heat at all. I had my bare hand under it and I felt nothing warmer than my own skin. One sword went from a yard of hard steel to a hanging bead of liquid the size of a fist in about 3 seconds. It turned there above my palm, bright and slow, with the gray sky moving across the surface of it. I held it there for a count of 5. I wanted them to see it. Then I let it go back. It went point first, then the edges, then the fuller, the tang, the grip, the little pitted guard. 5 heartbeats, and it was a sword again, and the rust had not lost a single flake off the guard. I turned it once to check. Not a mark different. Dayan told me later what that ought to have cost. 6 hours, 3 men, a charcoal forge, and a good day. And the blade comes out worse than it went in. I held it out to its owner, hilt first. The soldier who took it back was about my age, and his hands were not steady. He looked at the sword, and then at me, and then he could not look at either. "It is the same one," I said. "Check the guard, then say it out loud so they all hear you." He turned it over twice before he could speak. "It is my sword. Idea. The rust is still on it." I turned to Piers then, and I said the thing I'd been carrying since the long table under the candle rings. "You are right. It is not stone." I let that sit a moment. That house was never my road. I spent 11 years forcing a door that was never mine. Every day of it, somebody told me that failing made me nothing. It made me nothing at that table. It does not make me nothing here. Piers put his forehead down toward the dirt. "Say it back to me," I said. "It is not stone, my lord." His voice cracked on it. "It is better." I walked out of Cairn hold with my inheritance given away, and my name left at the gate. It took a burnt field and one melted sword to teach me that I had not lost an argument at all. I had simply been standing in the wrong house. Behind me, the 2 horses were still down and screaming. 4 farmers were fighting to get the shoes back on them, and the shoes came off the dirt and set themselves before a single hand reached the first hoof. Both animals were up inside a minute. In front of me, 120 people knelt in ash and waited for me to say what happened next. "Get them up," I said to Halden. "Get the fires lit again. We move at dawn." To where, my lord?" I looked north across the dead grass, past the burning patches, at nothing anybody in that column could see. "Northwest. 2 more days, then you can ask me again." They came over the ridge northeast of us in the last of the light. Riders. 50 by the dust. The count dropped to 30 as they cleared the crest. They came at a gallop with a wall of gray behind them. A banner rode up at the front, blood red with a black hammer on it. On the open plain, a banner at a gallop means one thing. The camp came apart. Farmers grabbed children. They ran for the carts. Somebody knocked a water barrel over. Halden's blade had left the scabbard by 6 inches before I got a hand on his wrist. I put my hand flat on his and pushed it back down. "My lord, leave it in. There are 30 of them." 29, and leave it in, Halden. I walked out past the shields and stood in the open grass by myself. A line of armored horse came down the slope at me. 30 of them. One of me. That is a long few seconds. A very long few. I will not pretend otherwise. I had been paying those men for 3 years. I was not going to greet them from behind a farm cart. They reined in 20 paces out. Hard! Gravel and grass went up and hung there. The lead rider swung down before his horse had finished stopping. He was built like a fence post. Narrow, hard. A white scar ran from his hairline down into his beard, taking his left eye out on the way. He crossed the last of the ground on foot. Then he went down, one knee in the dirt, fist against his chest. "Vance, of the Rust Hammers, 211 days on your coin, my lord, and I am 9 of them late. The eastern ford washed out, and I take the blame for it." "Stand up, Captain." "Not yet." He kept his head down. 20 years of noble money, and every one of them wanted something dishonest inside the first month. "You have paid me 3 years and never once asked me for a thing I could not tell my mother about." Behind him, 30 riders went from the saddle to one knee in a single motion, like a wall falling. 100 farmers stood behind me and watched it, 30 armed men on their knees, kneeling to a boy who had been publicly disowned 6 weeks earlier. My fighting strength climbed from 22 swords to 52 in the time it took one scarred man to give his name. I did not have to say anything after that. The kneeling said it. Halden had not moved. His hand was still on the scabbard where I had put it. "You knew," he said. "I knew." Vance had a saddle blanket down on the grass inside 10 minutes. A survey map came out and unrolled across it. 4 stones on the corners. Walls inked at a canyon mouth. Fields hatched out in blocks up a slope. 2 marks in the northeast with notes beside them in a clerk's hand, and Vance put a fingernail on each in turn. Iron ore, shallow seam, rock salt. 2 mines cut and both already working, and not 1 ounce out of either had ever reached a Cairn ledger. Piers had come up behind us. I watched him read the map and I watched the color go out of his face. That is not the site, he said. He said it to the map, not to me. My lord, the writ assigns you a location. Your father's steward read it out at the gate. If we do not present ourselves at the assigned site inside the season, they will call it desertion, and they will send someone. He was not being a coward. Pierce's family had lost their land 2 generations back over a clerical fault. He grew up hearing about it every winter of his life. I took the writ out of my coat and put it in his hands. Read it, out loud if you like. He read it. He got about halfway down, then back up to the top, then down again. Then they stopped on the line where a location should have been. The line was blank. There is a space here, he said, and nobody has written in it. One empty line on a crown document, and 3 years earlier I had spent more coin than that whole column was worth keeping it empty. A clerk in the Capitol Registry had taken the money and left the pen dry. Piers stared at the parchment like it had bitten him, then at me, then at it again. The season he had been counting down for 6 weeks had just dropped off the end of the world, and he could not find the words for it. Then that writ is the Crown's and not your father's, Vance said from the map, and House Cairn has no more claim on it than I do. That was the whole of it. One sentence, from a mercenary, and no lawyer in the East could have said it better. We rode at dawn. I noticed it the moment I got into the saddle. Every buckle on the girth hummed against my leg. The bit rings, the stirrup irons, the nails in the shoes, the rivets on my own belt, all of it thrumming, faintly like a plucked string held down. It did not stop. Not that night, not since. 2 days before, I had needed to reach 10 meters for a horseshoe. Now the metal answered whether I asked it to or not, and I could feel every nail in the column strung out behind me like beads on a wire. Halden rode beside me most of that morning without speaking. That is his way of asking. 3 years ago, I said eventually, my father sent you north with a caravan. 200 people, tools, seed, a great deal of timber. Settlers for the northern holdings, he said. Bad road, that one, all the way up. They were not for the northern holdings. They were mine. I wrote the manifest, I chose the route, and I picked you because you were the only man in that castle who would not read the crates. He wrote a long while. And the second wave? There were four caravans. 800 people moved north across 3 years, and he had walked every one of them there without knowing whose hand was on the map. He got down off his horse, right there on the road, in front of his own soldiers. He went down on one knee in the ruts with the rein still in his hand, twice in 3 days, from a man who had knelt to my father perhaps 6 times in 30 years. Get up, Halden. I have been serving a plan I could not see for 3 years, and I want that said out loud once before I stand. You used me. I did not soften it. He would have known. You were the best escort in my father's house, and I could not tell you why. If you want an apology, I will give you one. I will not tell you I would do it differently. He stood up and got back on his horse, and we did not discuss it for a year. The valley opened just after noon on the second day. The road bent around a shoulder of rock, and there it was. Mountains on 3 sides, gray and close. Snow still in the high cuts. One way in, a canyon mouth about 40 paces across, a stone throat between 2 cliffs. And across that throat, a wall, not a palisade, a wall, dressed stone. 20 feet of dressed stone where every map in the east showed open scrub, and 122 people behind me stopped walking at the same moment. All of them, at once. A gatehouse, a walk along the top, men standing on it, watching us come. Piers got out of his saddle to count them and reached 40 before the horn started. Then a horn went off on the wall. 2 long notes. It was answered from somewhere inside. Then a third time, from higher up, the gates started to swing. Piers said my title 3 times on that road and never once found anything to put after it. We rode in through the throat. Cliffs shut the sky out on both sides. Then the valley floor opened in front of us. The farmers behind me began making a noise I had never heard a crowd make before. Terraces, cut into the slope in steps, 5 and 6 deep, most of them already green. Irrigation channels along the cut lines. Water actually moving in them. New housing in rows. Timber and stone roofed. A forge with smoke coming out of it, and past the forge, on a rise at the center of the valley, a castle. Gray stone, 4 towers up, A fifth, now at half height, scaffolding still lashed to it. 9 days of waiting had cost day, and 2 made-up beds and gained that valley a roofed salt house. Cleared land had climbed from nothing to 50,000 acres in 3 years. I signed the first contract for that valley at 15 years old, and it cost me every coin I ever took out of my father's workshops. Every one of them traveled east to west, and not one showed on a Cairn ledger. "How much of this is yours?" Vance asked, riding up beside me. He was grinning like a wolf. "I have read 3 years of reports, and not one of them says castle. The reports were written before the last 2 seasons. And what changed since the last one, my lord? The whole camp is walking strange around you." I let my horse walk on a few paces. "I earn call," I said. "That is not a word, just as brustent." "It is now." A man came down the castle road to meet us at a fast walk. 2 clerks trotted to keep up with him. He had a rolled drawing under one arm, middle-aged, thin, ink on 3 fingers, dressed like a man who had not thought about his clothes in a decade. Beside me, Hald emitted a sound in his throat. "That is Master Dayan. I took that man out of Cairn hold myself 4 years ago, covered cart, at night." He turned in the saddle to look at me, and I watched him finally understand the size of what he had been carrying. He had escorted the finest builder in 3 provinces into a hole in the map and been told the man went south. "You have had him the entire time." Dayan stopped in the road in front of my horse and bowed. Then he ruined the bow by grinning. "You are 9 days late. In those 9 days, the East Terrace has gained water, the salt house has been roofed, and I have made up a bed in the West Tower twice." He looked past me down the column, then back at me with the grin gone. "Half your escort appears to have been set on fire." "Some of them were," I said. Halden counted the column that evening twice on his fingers. 122 had ridden out of Cairnhold with me. The number now stood at 152, and he wrote it down. I rode out of my father's gate with 122 people and no ground under any of them. 2 knights, 20 soldiers, 30 sworn riders now, 2 working minds, 50,000 acres. A castle 4 towers up. For the first time since I walked out of that hall, I owned the earth I was standing on. The administrative hall was the first finished room in the castle. Long table, plain benches, 3 windows down the south wall. Dayan had built the shelves before he built himself a bed. Vance had a wax tablet in front of him, and he did not touch it once. "4 tribes worth talking about inside 8 days' ride," he said. "The Ashfang are the biggest, and their chief owes me a life." He gave me a decade of the wasteland off the top of his head. 11 years back, at the Ford fight, he had dragged that chief out from under a dead horse. The man had never once pretended otherwise. The Stone Maw would trade with anybody not actively robbing them. The Ironshod hated him personally. He said they were not wrong to. The Red Talon took what they wanted. They burned the rest. And they know we are here? They know a wall went up, and not one of them knows what is behind it. I sat back. Dayan was writing. Halden had his arms folded, and Piers stood at the end of the table because he had not been told to sit. That was the moment I understood the actual problem. A valley, a wall, 50,000 acres and 2 working mines. And no government at all. Every man in that room served me out of habit or contract. Neither one holds when the first hard winter comes. So I stood up and drew my mother's sword. Vance moved his hand toward his own hilt on reflex, then stopped himself. I walked around the table to him. "Stand up, Captain." He stood. I put the flat of the blade on his right shoulder. "By the writ I hold from the crown, and on ground I own, I name you a knight of this territory. 3rd Guardian Knight, ranking every sworn sword in that valley except Halden and Piers. Guardian Knights went from 2 to 3 in the time it took a blade to touch a shoulder. He went down so hard his knee cracked on the boards. 30 of his own riders had crowded the doorway by then. They watched their captain shake. He did not say anything for a while. His one eye was wet, and he was not doing anything about it. 20 years he had sold that sword to nobles. He had gained exactly no rank out of any of them. 20 years I have bled for them, my lord, and every one of them paid me on time, and not one ever gave me a rank. They were paying for a sword. I am paying for a man. Then you have him." Dayan was next, and Dayan I had owed for longer. "Master Dayan, administrative officer of this territory with a knight's title and the pay to match." The territory went from no officers to 1, and he set his pen down like it had suddenly got heavy. You promised me that 3 years ago, he said, in a cart, at night. He had come out of that city with no patron and no work. Every man he asked for one wanted the credit and none of the cost. The finest aqueduct in the East stood with his name off it. He had been eating one meal a day when my cart pulled up. He rubbed his face with an inky hand. Then he stood, and he stood, then he bowed, properly this time. I did not believe you. I came anyway. A liar with a plan beat the truth I had. Holden and Piers came last, and theirs I could not pay yet. You will both hold land, real land, in this valley in your own names the day the crown recognizes it. Not before. I would not hand either of them paper a registry could tear up. Alden inclined his head and said nothing at all. He held land in the East already. He did not need mine, and we both knew it. 2 titles promised, and not one of them yet worth a line of ink. Piers took hold of the table edge. He gripped it until his knuckles lost their color. He did not say one word. His family had held 200 acres and a mill for 6 generations. They lost all of it in one afternoon to a clerk's error. No Cairn ever lifted a finger about it. A knighthood is a rank. Land is a thing a clerk cannot argue with. That was when I learned what the difference is worth to a man who has lost it once. We drank the Bally's own beer after, out of clay cups. It was rough. It was sour. Day, and apologized for it twice. Then I put the cups down and gave out the work. Salt first, and everything we have goes into refining it. Then the rest of it around the table. Dayan got the platforms above the canyon mouth, cut early. Ahead of everything, Vance got the caravan. Halden got the new men. Drilled him against the old ones, I told him, until I cannot tell which is which. His drill field went from 22 men to 52 in a week. By the second week, he could not sort them by eye, and he said so with something close to pride. Before the granary, Dayan said. Before the granary. He wrote it down and did not ask again. That is the whole reason I made him an officer. Vance had one more thing. If you want the tribes, do not ride out to them. Let the Ashfang chief stand guarantor and the rest will come here to look. Do it. You have not asked what it costs. It costs nothing and it buys us the ground, so send today. 2 weeks went past like this. Forge fires lit before dawn every day. The hammers came up the valley ahead of the light. Terraces filling with water and then with green. The salt house went up in 3 days flat. The boiling pans went in on the 4th. The drying floor gained a roof on the 5th. Carts went down to the mines empty and came back gray and heaped. Men slept 4 hours and went back down on the 11th day and fell asleep standing against a doorframe. Not one man in that yard woke him. Dayan cut the canyon platforms with 60 men and no complaint. Timber up the cliff face on ropes. Anchor holes driven into the rock. 60 men on ropes, and the 4 ledges reached full width on the 9th day, wide enough for 8 men each. Roofed with cut brush, so from below there was nothing to see but stone. He asked me once what went on them. I did not answer. He never asked again. The forge ran 2 shifts and then 3. Ingots stacked along the yard wall in black rows. 30 on the first day, then 60, then 110. Alden walked past those rows every morning on his way to the drill field, and he looked at them the way a man looks at a debt. 14 days. That is what it takes when everyone can see the point of it. Ann came up onto the south platform on the 15th morning, a wooden bowl in both hands. He held it out without a word. Salt, white as bone, dry, loose, glittering where the sun hit the grains. Not gray, not damp, not the coarse brown stuff we had been eating out of a sack since Cairn. The bowl looked like something taken out of a jeweler's tray. I wet my fingertip and touched it and put it on my tongue, clean, sharp, no bitterness at the back of it at all. I have eaten at a count's table since I could hold a spoon. I had never tasted salt like that in it. How much? 1,200 pounds in the house? 300 of it at this grade? In 15 days, that building had gained 1,200 pounds of salt out of bare rock. 2 weeks earlier, the whole territory had owned 1 sack of brown grit. Now there was more white salt in that building than the province could buy in a season. Dayan watched my face while I did the arithmetic. He already knew the answer. Frost salt, I said. Nobody calls it anything else, ever. And the territory? The clerks leave a blank on every form, and I keep writing in the valleys like a farmer. There were perhaps 40 people on that platform. Soldiers, masons, 2 of Vance's riders. A woman carrying mortar. I said it loud enough that it reached the far end of the stone before my hand came down. Iron hollow. Put it on the forms. A rider came up the ramp at a run before the noise had finished. Riders on the northern road, my lord. 30, tribal, white pole up. The Ashfang. Their chief's own son at the head of the column, and dusk was the answer to when. Vance had promised me 3 days. They had dropped it to 1 day. Anne swore quietly at the sky. Halden turned to watch the north road and said nothing. 3 lambs killed. The long haul laid. You! The good beer opened, and 20 packets of the best grade, Dayan, a full spoonful in each, wrapped in silk. He started to say something. Not cloth, silk. That is a great deal of salt to give away. It is a spoonful 20 times, and if they take it and ride home, then I have learned what they are for the price of a spoonful. Wrap them. Quests. 20 packets left the salt house that afternoon. The drying floor lost a full day of best grade to them. He wrapped everyone himself. He counted them twice. Then he carried the box up to the hall by hand, past 2 guards who moved out of his way without being told, and set it on the table where the firelight would find the silk. I stood on the platform and watched the north road. Men who arrive a day early are either eager or worried, nothing else. The difference between those two was going to decide the next month of my life. The smoke went up an hour before dusk, 3 columns, spaced along the northern ridge, straight and black in still air. Vance came onto the platform at a run. He dropped his tablet on the stone to point at them. 3 is a delegation. 3 says we come to speak, and 2 would be telling us to shut the gate. 3 columns, and of 4 tribes inside 8 days' ride, only 1 had lit any. He read them twice to be sure. The number did not change. A man who owes another man his life does not put that in a messenger's mouth. Vance said so, and then said nothing else for the length of the ramp. I went down and called for a horse. 10 riders, and no shields. Halden objected the whole way down the ramp. A lord waits behind his own wall. There is a wall right there, freshly built, 50 men standing on it. I escort went from 50 swords to 10 on one sentence, and he counted them off with his jaw set the entire time. They rode a day early, I said. If I make them stand outside a gate after that, I have told them exactly what I think of them, so bring 10 horses now. We were at the canyon mouth as the last light went. They came up out of the dark in a long file with torches. 30 riders, small horses. No armor worth the name. Furs and leather with a great deal of bone worked into both. They rode loose and easy. Men who had grown up in the saddle and would die in it. 30 torches came up that road, and my 10 men now looked like a very small number in the dark. At the head of them was a young man in a wolfskin cloak. He was about my age. The hood was the wolf's own head, pushed back off his face. The pelt hung to his heels. He had a long straight scar across the back of one hand. That is Cale, Vance said quietly. At his coming of age, he went into the wastes alone and killed a grizzly with no spear and no dogs. 1 bear, 1 boy. He had gained the cloak off his own back doing it, walked out of the wastes wearing it, and never once been asked to prove the story since. Cale swung down and walked to me and then did not stop. He walked a slow circle around me, all the way around, close enough to touch. Taking his time. Nobody spoke while he did it. My 10 had their hands where I could see them. I was glad of that. Came back to the front and stopped. 2 full circuits. He had counted my 10 riders twice on the way round, and I watched him do it. Then he lifted a necklace off his own neck. Fangs strung on sinew. Lumps of black glass worked in between them, held it out on both palms. I have never been able to explain how I knew what was cut into the biggest fang. I had never seen that script in my life, not once, but I looked at it, and it opened in front of me like a word in my own tongue. Friend, I read aloud. 1 word off 1 fang, and 30 riders went from a low-rolling murmur to nothing at all. I put the necklace on over my head. I did not wait for the interpreter to open his mouth. The fang settled cold against my collarbone. Cale's face did not move, but something behind it did. You read that, he said. His accent was thick and slow and perfectly clear. Nobody east of the ridge reads that. Then I am the first. Come inside and eat. There is a thing first. I had the carved box brought forward, opened on a flat stone in the torchlight. 20 packets. White silk, each one folded closed. One of my men lifted the top layer back on one of them. Cale looked into it and did not move for 3 full seconds. Then he licked his fingertip the way any man does. He touched the salt. He put it in his mouth. I have seen a man told his wife had died. I have seen a man given a title he never expected. I have not seen a face do what that man's face did over a spoonful of salt. He turned and said something to his riders. 2 of them came forward at a run. 3 men now stood over that open box in the dark. The way men stand over a body. How much? Cale said. It was not a question. Vance stepped up on my left, exactly as we had agreed in the yard. None of it, not at any price your tribe can raise, and I will not have my lord embarrassed by the asking. The price went from a number to nothing in one breath. He did not soften it. We dug it, boiled it, dried it, lost money on every pound at that purity. He said all of that standing in torchlight with 30 armed men in front of him. The tribesmen's faces closed. That is the moment where it goes one of 2 ways. I let it sit. I counted to 5 in my head. He is telling you the truth, and that grade is not for sale. I picked up a handful of the 2nd grade out of a sack. I let it run to my fingers where they could see it. Here is what is, coarser, slightly gray, half the work in it, 100 times better than the salt dirt you scrape off the flats north of here, which I am told your children eat sand with. I let the last of it fall. That I will sell you, as much as you can carry, every season, forever, at a price a herdsman can pay. Their salt was about to climb from gray, flat scrapings to that, 100-fold, every season for the rest of their lives. 30 men made a noise I felt in the stone under my boots. One of them went to his horse and came back with a bag. He shook it out on the stone, gray grit, sand in it, bone chips. That was what his tribe had been salting meat with all winter, and he put a pinch of my 2nd grade beside it so the 2 piles sat there in the torchlight together. The pile on the left had cost him 4 days of digging. The pile on the right had cost him nothing yet. They shouted. They struck their own chests. One older rider grabbed the man beside him by both shoulders. He shook him until his teeth went together. The interpreter simply gave up and stood there laughing. Cale did not join in. Cale's face closed instead, and he waited for the noise to come down. Now I say the other thing, and it is why I am early. 3 days ago there were riders on your western approach, and they were not ours. 3 days. They had walked the length of my wall, counted the men standing on it, gone north again. Every bit of good humor Cale had brought with him was out of his face by the end of that sentence. Drought took the grass beyond the salt flats this year and their herds are dead. A tribe with dead herds does not trade. It takes. The Red Talon. He said the name the way you say a disease. 200 fighters, perhaps more, and 3 of their men are awakened berserkers. I have fought one of those and I did not enjoy it. The enemy climbed to 200 while he was talking. Then 3 of them turned out to be awakened. Vance's jaw tightened. Holden went still. Still enough that I heard him stop breathing. That is perfect timing, I said. Cale looked at me for a long moment. You misunderstood me. No, I heard all of it. Then you are mad, he said it flatly, without heat. I can put 200 warriors on your wall inside 6 days. My father will send them on my word and you will take them. No, boy. No, I said. Thank you, truly, but no. 200 warriors offered inside 6 days. The number I kept dropped to none before he had finished saying it. I did not explain myself and I was not going to. There are decisions that only work if nobody hears the arithmetic behind them. Then what will you do? Stay 4 days. Eat my food, sleep in my hall, and bring your 30 onto the wall the morning they come because I am putting on a hunting show and I would like an audience. He stared at me. Then he laughed. The most a pair effects. One hard bark of it with no humor in it anywhere. A hunting show. 200 Red Talon. Bring your men up early. The good positions fill quickly. The banquet was that night in the long hall. 3 lambs on spits. Honey wine, which they had never had. It dropped 4 of them under the benches before midnight. Bread still warm. Butter, which caused an argument. Roast onions in the ash. None of it was what stopped them at the door. Down the whole length of that table, every 3 feet, open wooden bowls of white salt, not measured, not covered, not locked in a box with a man over it, just sitting there, uncounted, the way you leave water out for people. The first man through the door stopped so hard the man behind him walked into his back. 30 warriors came through that doorway and the line dropped to a standstill 4 times before the last of them was seated. 2 of his men had counted the bowls before the meat came. 31 bowls down that table. They gave up somewhere past the 2nd lamb and stopped counting altogether. Cale sat at my right and did not touch a bowl for an hour. Then he did, once, and looked at me while he did it. You are showing off. Yes. It is working. He set the pinch down on his tongue and swallowed. In my grandfather's time, a man could buy a wife for 4 pounds of salt. 4 pounds. There was more than that left in the bowls between us and the door, and 2 of his own riders had already spilled some and been too frightened to say so. There is more than that in one shed behind the forge. He told me not to say that where anyone could hear it. I told him I was saying it to him. He did not laugh, and he did not eat anything else for a while. Allied tribes had gone from none to one in the time it took a man to taste a spoonful. That was what 20 packets bought, not goodwill. A name on a wall. We were most of the way through the second lamb when the doors came open at the far end. Piers came up the length of the hall and rode dirt, cloak still on. He put his mouth by my ear. He had come in loudly enough that the hall had already stopped eating. There is no quiet way to say it. 200, my lord. Riders, no carts, no herds, 10 miles out and camped on the flat. He straightened up. No herald, and there will not be one. When? Dawn. 200 men, 10 miles, and the number of people still chewing in that hall dropped to none while he said it. I set my cup down. I looked at the length of that table. My knights. 30 foreign warriors. All of them there to see whether I was worth their winter. And more open salt than any of them had seen in a lifetime, sitting out in bowls, being spilled. Then eat. It is going to be an early morning. The war room had 4 candles in it and 5 men and a map nobody looked at. Every iron ingot in the warehouse, I said, out of the racks, onto carts stacked in the workshop yard. Tonight, wake whoever you need. Day-Ann wrote it down without lifting the pen off the page. All of it? Nails, hinges, plow irons, the whole winter stock. All of it. Halden put both hands flat on the table and leaned his weight onto them. My lord! Hear me once, and then I will do whatever you say. He waited until I nodded. You have a wall, 50 trained soldiers, 3 knights in a canyon 40 paces wide. Let them break themselves on the gate for 2 hours and they will go home. That costs us nothing, and nobody outside this valley ever hears about it. It was a good plan. I had turned it over for a week and put it down each time. I am not going to let them go home. He straightened up slowly. Ah! The candle by his hand bent in the draft and he did not look at it. You want them dead, all of them. I want it done once, I said. 4 tribes sit within 8 days' ride. I have salt they cannot make and iron they cannot dig. Bloody the red talon's nose, and next spring the stone maw come, and the year after that the iron shod. I will spend 20 years proving the same thing to men who were not there the last time. And if you break 200 men in one morning, then I never have to say it again. The survivors say it for me. He waited. He knew there would not be any. There will be 30, I said, on my wall, eating my food. I invited them. Holden was quiet, a long moment. He is not a stupid man, and he was not arguing with the arithmetic. I am old, he said at last. I have watched what happens to men who show a king something new. They do not get left alone with it. I knew that. I had known it for a week and gone ahead anyway. He nodded once. He did not raise it again that night. He has never raised it since, and I owe him for that. Day-Ann cleared his throat. My lord, you told me 4 cannons. To bore and cast 4 barrels, I would want a foundry, 8 founders, a mold pit, and about 9 weeks. I have tonight. It cannot be done in one night. I did not argue with him. Arguments are what you give a man when you have nothing to show him. There was a brass candlestick on the table between us, lit, with the wax running down one side. It came up off the wood. Dayon pushed his chair back hard enough to scrape stone. The candlestick rose to the height of my eyes and stopped. Then it opened. It unwound from the base upward. It drew itself out into a long, slow rope of brass, turning above the map. It coiled. It looped through itself twice. Then it drew back in from the top down, tighter and tighter, until it stood as a candlestick again, upright in the air. The flame never once went out. It set itself back on the table with a small click. Vance had his cup halfway to his mouth, and he left it there. I earn call, I said. That is what it is called. Where wood is concerned, I am nobody. Where stone is concerned, I am the worst Cairn who ever lived. I looked at Dayan. Where metal is concerned, I am God. Ask me for the barrels. He looked at my eyes. He told me later that they were solid gold, edge to edge, and that he did not sleep well for a week afterward. I would like 4 barrels, he said. The workshop yard was full by midnight. Every ingot we owned stacked in black bars under torchlight. 200 people's worth of nails and hinges and horseshoes went onto the pile with them. Carts came in loaded and went out light. I sent the carters home. I kept Dayan because he had asked. I kept nobody else. Then I lifted all of it at once. It came up off the stone in one motion and hung there, a field of black iron at the height of a man's head, 20 feet across, every bar spaced and still, throwing torchlight back in dull red squares. One sword in a cellar had been the whole of my reach a week before, and now a warehouse hung over my head. Day-Ann took 2 steps into the yard and stopped where he was. Then the heat came, not from underneath. There were no coals. There were no coals. It bloomed inside the metal. Orange came up through the black from the center of every bar outward, the way color comes into an ember when you breathe on it. The whole yard went warm. Day-Ann's lantern glass fogged. He wiped it on his sleeve. It fogged again. It fogged again. He kept wiping it anyway. The bars lost their edges. They ran together, iron in midair, running like water uphill, gathering. 100 shapes went up into the glow, and only 4 came down out of it. 4 long bodies drew themselves out lengthwise, thickening at one end, tapering at the other. No crucible, no mold, nothing underneath them but 40 feet of open air and a stone floor. Sparks came off the undersides. They fell past me and died before they landed. I stood beneath it with my arms down at my sides. 9 weeks was the number Day-Ann had given me, and now it was burning off over his head in the dark. The lantern went out in his hand. He did not notice it go. 3 hours. At the end of them, 4 cannons stood in the yard on their cradles, black, ticking as they cooled. They gave off a smell like a smithy in August. The air above them shook the torchlight out of true. 4 barrels now, where 3 hours earlier there had been nothing but a yard of stacked bars. Day-Ann counted them. Then he counted them again and put his hand flat on the nearest one to be sure of it. I walked the length of each with my palm on the metal. No seam, no weld line, no rivets, no bands, no plug at the breech. 4 pieces of iron with nothing joined to anything. There is no join, he said. He walked the whole length of the second barrel with his fingers dragging on it. Then he walked it back the other way. A gun fails at the join. Every gun that has ever burst at the join. This cannot burst. He said that to the barrel and not to me. Then get them up the rock. I want all 4 on the platforms before the sky goes gray. It took ropes and 40 men and most of the 4th hour. The barrels came up the cliff face, turning slowly on the lines. Every time one swung in toward the rock, I took the weight off it. The men on the ropes felt it go light. They stopped hauling. They looked at each other. Then they hauled harder without a word from anybody. All 4 now sat 60 feet above the canyon mouth. The platforms Day-Ann had cut a week early were timbered into the cliff, screened with brush, angled straight down the length of the throat. I drilled 10 men on them until dawn. 10 soldiers who had never stood beside a cannon before that night, with only an hour and a half to learn one in. Load, ram, stand clear of the mouth, not behind it either. Beside, cover your ears, on my hand, not on your neighbor's. Again, the first run was a shambles. A rammer went in crooked and jammed. A man walked behind a muzzle and I put him on the rock face by his collar. 2 of them were still fumbling wadding when my hand came down. We did it 11 times. On the 9th, I stopped shouting corrections. On the 11th, nobody walked behind anything, nobody dropped anything, and they beat my hand by half a second. 10 gunners now, where at midnight there had been none. What is in them? The youngest one asked me. He was maybe 17. Iron balls the first time, broken iron the second. And after that? There is no after that, I said. 2, that is what we have. He nodded like it was a normal answer and went back to his ram. 2 volleys for 200 men, and after the second there was nothing left in the valley to fire. Then the sky went gray and the horn on the wall sounded twice. I went and got my guests. Kyle was awake and armored already, standing in the yard with his 30 behind him. I walked them onto the wall myself and put them at the center of the walk, where the whole canyon lies open below you like something on a table. The best seats in the valley, I said. Do not lean out. Tell your men to open their mouths when I raise my hand. They will understand in a moment. Cale looked down at the empty canyon. Then he put his men where I told him. 50 soldiers, 3 knights, and 30 Ashfang now stood on a wall with nothing at all in front of them. They came across the flat as the light came up. 200. And they came on foot at a walk. That surprised me until I understood it. They had eaten our horses, hide shields, axes, and spears. A great deal of shouting, done to keep themselves warm, and at the front, 3 men. They stood a full head above anyone near them, bare-chested in that cold. Red patterns crawled across their skin from the belly up over the shoulders, moving the way Halden's runes had moved. One of them carried a mattock with a head the size of a bucket. They did not shout with the rest. They came on ahead of the mass. The mass went where they went. Kale's hands closed on the parapet stone. Behind him, his 30 went quiet, and now not one of them moved. I lifted my hand. Down at the gate, the defenders pulled back. All of them at once, in good order, back through the arch and away from the mouth. The gates stayed open. Not a man on the ground. I did. Not a spear in the throat of that canyon. 40 paces of empty stone road and a wide open valley behind it. The red talons saw it and made a noise like a wave breaking. They ran straight for the gap, shoving each other for the front, shields going down under their own feet. The 3 berserkers ran with them. Even a berserker follows a broken door. They poured into the canyon. I stood with my hand up. The first of them reached 2/3 of the way down the throat. The last were still coming in past the mouth. The walls held them tight, then tighter, 60 feet above their heads. 10 men had been kneeling in the brush since before it was light. 200 men in a stone throat 40 paces wide and only 10 above them. Somebody behind me on the wall started to say something, and Vance shut him up with one word. I waited until the stone was packed with them, shoulder to shoulder, all the way from the mouth to the middle. Then I dropped my hand. The sound came up out of that canyon like the mountain itself had cracked open, and the wall under my boots jumped hard enough to throw a man onto his hands. The first thing the iron did was go straight through. 4 balls into a packed column at 60 feet of drop. They did not stop at the first man. They did not stop at the fourth. Each one opened a lane down the whole length of that column. 4 balls went in, and 4 open lanes were left standing in a mass that had been solid. When a ball ran out of men, it hit the far wall. Then it came back. That is the part nobody expects. A canyon absorbs nothing. The stone is hard. The walls are close. An iron ball at that speed does not die when it strikes rock. It turns. One came off the left wall and went across the passage sideways. It hit the right and came back again. It skipped down that throat like a stone across a pond. Shin height, chest height, taking men from the flank while they were still facing forward. You cannot shield sideways. Nobody in the world trains for sideways. A big man near the front went down without a mark on the front of him. 200 had come in through that mouth, and now not one of them was facing the thing killing them. Kale leaned out over the parapet. His mouth was open. He did not know it was open. One of them tried to climb. He was fast. He got a hand into a crack in the left wall and hauled himself up out of the crush. 12 feet, 15, scrambling for the lip with his axe still in his belt. He was reaching for the next hold when a ricochet found him. It took him off the wall in the middle of the reach. He never fell. He simply was not there anymore. Beside me, Kale's hand came off the stone and went back down flat. Above us on the platforms, the 10 were already working. I could hear them through the ringing. Clear, ram. Stand beside, cover your ears. The second volley was not iron balls. It was broken iron, scrap, nails, chain link, cut bar. Everything the workshop floor had swept up in 3 years, packed into 4 barrels and pointed down a stone corridor 40 paces wide. That canyon became one enormous gun barrel. The men inside it were standing in the shot. 4 barrels emptied in one breath, and what had been a column was now a floor. 3 berserkers had walked in ahead of that warband. The scrap took 2 of them apart where they stood. I will not describe it further than that. They had walked ahead of their whole warband because nothing on that plane could hurt them. They were entirely correct about that. It did not matter at all. The thing that hit them was not a man with a spear. It was 400 pounds of scrap iron arriving at once. The third one was lifted off his feet. He went up and over backwards with his arms out, turned in the air by the pressure of it. He came down on his shoulder, 20 feet from where he had been standing. He got up. That is the thing. He actually got up. Then the ricochets came back off the walls and put him down again. 3 had come over the ridge awake and untouchable. 2 volleys later, only one of them was still breathing. Kale said something short in his own language. Nobody translated it. He said it again anyway. What was left of the red talon broke. They turned as a mass and ran for the mouth. The mouth is 40 paces wide, and there were still 100 men trying to get in through it. Men went down and did not come back up. I watched them die under the boots of their own tribe. There is no glory in that. I am not going to pretend there was. It was a stone room with 2 doors, and we had closed both of them. 200 had gone in at that mouth. The number still moving dropped every time I looked down. On the wall beside me, it had gone very quiet. 30 tribal warriors stood along that parapet. Not one of them had made a sound since my hand came down. Their faces were the color of ash. One of them turned and vomited over the outside of the wall and then stayed bent over it. Another put a hand flat on his back and left it there. Kyle did not move. He had both hands on the stone, and he did not blink, and he did not look away for any of it. Under 10 minutes. That is what it took. I did not time it, Piers did, out of habit, and I have never asked him to check. 4 tubes, 2 volleys. 10 minutes, and the only road into my valley was now mine to price. Cale stepped back from the parapet. Then he went down on one knee on the wall walk in front of 30 of his own men and put his forehead almost to his own hand. The ash fangs stand with iron hollow, he said. Not for salt. My father will ask me why, and I will tell him what I saw here. If you send word, we come. Stand up, Cale. In a moment, stand up. You are the only man on this wall who did not look away, and I would rather have you beside me than under me. He stood. He was shaking very slightly in the hands. So was I. One tribe had ridden up that road at dawn to watch a hunt. One tribe was now sworn to my gate, and it had cost me nothing but noise. Vance came up the stair with a wax tablet an hour later and did not bother to soften it. 200 came in at the mouth, my lord. I counted them myself. 11 walked out, and 9 of those will not see the week. He looked at the tablet and then put it away. Our whole cost for the morning was 1 man with a broken wrist, and he had done it falling off the wall from the noise. 200 in. And now, we guessed the biggest to see stirred pretty much. 11 left standing, and 9 of those already dying on their feet. Cale made me hold the tablet up so he could see the marks, and then he counted them out loud in his own language for the men behind him. They brought me the last berserker an hour later. Piers's soldiers dragged him out of the smoke by the ankles, face down over stone that was not clean. It took 6 men to do it. They put him on his knees in the courtyard, and he stayed there swaying, one arm hanging wrong, half his ribs stove in, the red patterns on his skin gone dull as old paint. I crouched in front of him. Why? I said. You are awakened. You could have hired that arm to any lord between here and the coast. Why come and eat a stranger's wall? He looked up. He had a great deal of blood in his mouth. Drought, he said. 2 summers. The grass beyond the flats came up and died in the same month, both years. The herds went first. Then the old ones, he breezed. It sounded wrong. There were 4,000 of us. There are not 4,000 now. A chief who cannot feed his people is not a chief. So we came to take from a town that was new and soft. I told them it would be easy. I was the one who told them that. Nobody in that courtyard said a word. Your name, I said. Griv Von. Say it louder. Griv Von. He put his forehead down into the bloody dirt and left it there. Kill me by my name then. I ate first at every fire for 11 years. I brought them here. Do not make me sit while you do it. I stood up. Get him a healer, I said. Feed him. When he can stand, he stands at my gate. He lifted his head very slowly. I do not understand. I killed nothing of yours. I did not get close enough to try. No, you did not. You did not. That is rather the point of the morning. You are a warrior of this valley now, if you will have it. You told the truth when you had nothing to gain from it, and you did not ask me for your life. That is 2 more things than most men bring me. I have made better decisions since, and I have never made a cheaper one. 3 berserkers had come over the ridge that morning. 2 were still on the canyon floor. 1 was now on his knees in my courtyard on my side of it, and Cale watched him get up. We opened the trade talks that same afternoon. The blood had not been washed off the canyon floor. I want that on the record, because it was deliberate. I had crates of frost salt carried up from the salt house and stacked in the courtyard where the ashfang could see them. 6 of them left my hands as a gift before anybody had said the word price. Cale's negotiator was a lean, older man. Very good memory. No interest at all in being charmed. Salt, iron tools, cloth, he said, for horses, furs, herbs, hides. Wait for weight, we will argue later. What is the catch, my lord? There is always one line. I let him wait for it. Say it. Every trade happens here, I said. Inside this valley. I do not send caravans out, and I do not meet anyone at a halfway stone. If a tribe wants iron hollow salt, a tribe comes to iron hollow and buys it at my gate. He thought about that for a while. Bist summer sized the something. That is a great deal of traveling for a herdsman. It is. And every man who comes to buy walks up the canyon to do it. Yes, he does. He looked at me then with the first real respect he had shown all day. He had worked out in about 4 seconds what had taken me a month to plan. The delegation rode out at dusk. They took 2 sample crates strapped across a spare horse. They took a commission agreement on Cale's mark, and every one of those 30 men took a story they would be telling for the rest of their lives. Cale turned in the saddle at the canyon mouth and raised his hand once. He did not shout anything. I appreciated that. 30 men had ridden in to watch a hunt. 30 rode out now carrying the only account of it there would ever be. I stayed on the wall until the torches were out of sight. Then Day and Piers came up the stair together, which is how I knew. They waited until the gate below had been shut and barred. Day-An had a slate in his hand and did not look at it. Say it, I said. The powder is gone, my lord, Piers said. All of it. Both volleys took everything we had in the valley, and there was less than I told you to begin with. I have scraped the barrels. There is enough for a signal charge, and that is being generous. How long to make more? Day-An answered. Saltpeter we do not have. Sulfur we do not have. Ibracista. We can send east and buy both, quietly, in small amounts so nobody asks why. 2 months if the roads hold. 4 if they do not. I looked down the length of the canyon. You could still see the shapes down there in the last of the light. 4 cannons. Seamless, black, unburstable. Sitting on their platforms 60 feet above the only road into my valley. By tomorrow morning, every tribe within 8 days' ride would be telling each other what those 4 tubes did to 200 men in 10 minutes. Not one of them could be fired. 4 barrels on the cliff. 0 charges left in the valley for any of them. Then nobody outside this wall learns that, I said. Not a word, not to a merchant, not to a wife, not to a man you trust. And, when the next tribe comes to test us, Pierce said, they will not test us. They will come to buy salt, and they will walk up that canyon to do it, and they will look up at those barrels the whole way. I sounded a great deal more certain than I was. They started arriving 3 days later at first light. They came up the canyon road because there is no other road. I watched from the gatehouse. Every column did the same thing. They rode up the throat at a good pace, talking. Then they reached the stretch 2/3 of the way in. The stone there is scorched black in long streaks, cratered in a dozen places. 200 men had died on that floor, and only the iron was left of them. Every column slowed there. Every single one. Men leaned out of the saddle to put a hand on the rock. Then they stopped talking. Then they rode the rest of the way at a walk. They came through the arch, greedy-eyed. Then they went quiet at 3 things, in order. First, the barrels. You cannot avoid them at that gate. You pass directly underneath. Look up, and everyone looks up, and 4 black mouths are angled down at the road under your horse. After, 4 mouths, and not one man rode under them without counting all 4. Second, the yard. 80 men now stood in mashed armor, in ranks that did not move when the horses came through. Third, the gatepost. Grivon stood there, 7 feet of him, arms folded, healed enough to be upright, and not much more. The red patterns showed over the bandage wrap. Every chief in that region knew exactly who he was. 2 of them had lost men to him personally. He did not greet anybody. He stood at his post like a piece of the architecture. I had not put up a sign in that canyon. I had not needed one. I left the floor exactly as it was and made every one of them walk it. The iron shod came in last and made trouble first. Their column had arrived a day behind the others. Thin horses, 11 pack frames, and only 2 of them carried anything at all. A tribe that arrives late with nothing to trade has one thing left to spend. That is nerve. A big man in a scale coat shoved out to the front of the crowd. He pointed straight up at the platforms. Iron tubes, he said. He said it loudly and in our tongue so there would be no misunderstanding. 200 red talon and iron tubes. My chief believes it. I do not. Where are the wounds? Where are the bodies? He turned and played to the yard. There is no weapon that kills 200 men from a cliff. There are only tubes and a boy and a story. The courtyard went very still. Die! Vance moved his hand toward his sword. I caught his wrist and put it back down. I did not answer the man. How? I did not stand up. I turned my head about 4 inches and looked at the gatepost. Grivon came off the wall. He crossed that courtyard at a walk. The iron-shod warrior got his axe up in both hands. Properly. Cross his body the way you would block a horse. He was not a coward and he was not slow. One punch. The haft came apart in his own hands. 2 halves went spinning away across the flagstones. The fist went through the gap where the haft had been. It took him in the center of the chest. His breastplate folded like a wet leaf. He left the ground entirely. He only stopped 11 feet later, against the water trough. He did not get up. Nothing about him moved at all. He had been the biggest man in that yard 1 breath earlier. Now he was a shape in the dust, and the iron-shod chief did not step forward to collect him. Grivon turned around. He walked back to the gatepost and folded his arms. Nobody had told him to hit the man. Nobody had told him to stop. He had done exactly the right amount of both, which is worth more than the punch was. The silence in that yard was the deepest I have ever stood in. I let it run. Then I stood up. Healers, I said. 2 of them. Splints, needle, hot water. Get his chest open and get him breathing before you do anything else. Somebody in the iron-shod line made a noise of pure confusion. Piers came to my shoulder. He did not like it, and his face said so for him. We mend him where they can watch it, I said. Fetch the good healer, not the apprentice. They carried him out on a door. 4 men to the corners and a 5th walking alongside with both hands on the ribs. I waited until he was through the archway. Then I spoke to the chiefs, all of them, in the open yard. I did not raise my voice much. I did not have to. That is how this valley works, I said. It breaks you, then it fixes you, then it sells you salt. Their interpreter took a moment with that. He will walk out of here in a month, I said. He will walk out. His ribs will be set and his lungs will work and he will owe me nothing. Ah! That was the version with my gate guard in it. I glanced up and every eye in that courtyard followed mine to the platforms. The next man who calls me a story gets the version with the cannons. Not one of them tested it. Not that season. Not the next one either. The trading yard opened an hour later and it did not close for 2 days. Out went salt. Bags, then crates, then whole sledges of it, more than any of them had come to buy. Out went iron. But they says out went iron. Axe heads, knife blanks, plow irons, cook pots, nails by the keg. Out went wool cloth and linen. His Stonemaw wanted the cloth more than the salt and would not admit it. In came cattle, in a noise you could hear from the castle steps. The east pens took 400 head and would not take more. We broke the north field open and filled that as well. 640 head now stood inside my fence line. The men on the rails gave up counting out loud, somewhere past 500. In came horses. In came horses. 211 of them came up that road in string. About 90 were better than anything we now rode. Furs came by the bale. 500 bales climbed the warehouse wall. The men stacking them sent for a ladder. Herbs I could not name, dried and bundled. Dayan's people fell on the crates like children. 31 crates. And said 2 of them cost more than every cow in the pens. He said it holding one against his chest. Hides, tallow, horn, sinew, and people. I want to be honest about this part too. They brought slaves. That is how it is done out there. It was done long before I existed and none of them thought twice about it. They came up the canyon in lines with rope at the wrists. Most of them were from tribes that had lost a war. The salt house was the thing that undid the chiefs. I had the doors opened and let them stand inside it. A room the length of a barn. White salt heaped from the floor to the roof beams down one whole side. Men walking on planks laid over the top of it. 3 chiefs stood in that doorway and did not speak. One of them put his hand into it up to the elbow and left it there. An entire lifetime of scraping gray dirt off a flat, and then that. 11 tons of salt left that house over 2 days and the heap did not visibly drop. I made the announcement on the second afternoon from a mounting block in the middle of the trading yard, loud enough to reach the pens. Every man and woman traded into this valley works 5 years, fed and housed and paid the same wage as any of my farmers. At the end of 5 years of good work, they are a free citizen of Iron Hollow with land rights and a name on the roll. 2 sentences. Then I got down off the block. There was a line of new arrivals along the eastern fence. They sat in the dirt with their hands still tied. A woman near the end of it lifted her head. She had been looking at the ground the entire time. She looked up at me across 60 feet of yard. She did not look away again for as long as I stood there. I have signed treaties since. None of them cost me anything like that woman's face. The chiefs did their arithmetic in front of me and did not know their faces were doing it. I watched the older ones work it through. 5 years. Fed, paid, freed. And their own herdsmen, 3 days right away, working the same hours for the same nothing, forever. Not one of them said a word about it. 2 of them stopped smiling. One looked directly at me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression my father wore at that long table. I had just put a door in the back of every tribe on the wasteland. Then I told them where the handle was. That night, Vance walked me down the castle platform rail. He did not read me a board. The trading yard was still lit below us. He did not need paper for any of it. He pointed at the pens first. Cattle stood shoulder to shoulder from the fence line out past the lamps. The dark went further than the lamps did. Then the horse lines, 4 deep along the water. 90 head at the near end had cost their tribes more than any of them wanted to admit out loud. Then the warehouse, those doors propped wide. 500 bales of fur now stacked to the beams, the white of the salt heap showing behind them. Then the crates, 31 under canvas, with 2 men posted on them. Dayan had asked for a guard at noon and now had one. A war's worth of livestock, Vance said. Every chief in the region walked in here angry and walked out grateful. He turned. He looked at the 4 black shapes above the canyon mouth in the dark. And we did not spend 1 charge of powder, he said. We do not have 1 charge of powder to spend. No. Then the eastern fence where the new people were. Fires had been lit down there for them. Somebody had carried bread out without being told to. 400 souls had come up that canyon between breakfast and dark. My valley had grown by 400 in a single day. Dayan made a small strangled sound behind us. He had been running sums on his fingers for the better part of an hour. Housing for 400, he said. Grain for 400 through a winter. Latrines, wells, a second bakehouse. You have a month, and you have 400 new pairs of hands to build it with. He wrote it down anyway, the way he always did. Then he underlined the month twice. He did not look up. You understand that I will hate you for a month. I do. Vance set his hands on the rail and looked back down at the pens. My lord, I have served 11 noble houses. He shook his head slowly. None of them ever got that much for nothing. It was not for nothing, I said. It cost 200 men in the canyon, and I will be paying that off for the rest of my life. Dayan dug the foundry and under the north slope, brick vaults and hot as a bread oven. It is the best thing anyone built in that valley. The first barrel came out of the casting pit on a cradle while I was standing there. It had cost 9 days and 14 men. I put my hand on it, still warm. There was a seam running down one side. Faint, filed nearly flat, but there, under the fingertip, there was a plug at the breech end where the core had been drawn. I ran my thumb along that seam 3 times. It is not as good as yours, Dayan said. He was covered in gray dust. He was also extremely pleased with himself. And it will burst before yours will. It exists without me. That is what I said. It is not as good. Master Dayan, I took my hand off the barrel. You have just made this valley able to arm itself while I am asleep, or wounded, or 3 provinces away. There is nothing in here I value more. He did not know what to do with that, so he went back to shouting at his founders. I dest 1 cannon on that cradle, and not 1 hour of my power spent on it. I gave the order in the foundry doorway. A standing corps, I said, not soldiers borrowed off the wall when there is trouble. Gunners, permanent and doing nothing else, their own barracks, their own pay, their own rank ladder. Piers commands it. Piers went down on 1 knee right there in the brick dust in front of his own gun crews. I had not expected that at all. My lord, I want the powder as well. Explain, the mixing, the milling, the drying, the storage. All of it inside the corps, under 1 officer, and that officer is me. He looked up at me. I cannot lift a nail. I will never awaken. I can be the man who makes the thing that killed 200 raiders. I would like to be him for the rest of my life. I had a bound manual under my arm. I had written it over 4 nights. I had been carrying it around for a week, waiting for exactly that sentence. I put it in his hands. Read the top line out loud. He opened it. Across the head of the first page, I had ruled a line in red ink. Any deviation from this drill will cost a hand or a life, he read. Every word after that is drill, loading order, ram counts, swab intervals, powder handling, what you do when a barrel misfires, and what you do when a man panics. I tapped the cover. 7 cannons on those platforms, and nothing on this continent walks up that canyon. Get me 7. Make them boring. He held that book like a relic. We had one, 6 left to cast. It was paper and my own handwriting. It was also the first thing that Valley ever produced that owed nothing to what I could do with my hands. A month later, I sat down and did the honest accounting. Castle study past midnight, 1 lamp, the window open onto the valley with the forge fires still burning below. I did what I have done since I was a boy whenever something frightened me. I stopped guessing and measured it. I took a flooring nail out of the drawer, common iron, a finger long. I set it on the desk an arm's length from the chair and sat back and asked it to come. It was in my palm before my hand was open. I put it on the far corner of the desk and asked again. It slid, caught on the grain, and came. Then I carried it to the windowsill and sat back down. Nothing. I could feel it perfectly well. It sat there in my head, cold and thin and exactly shaped, the way iron always did. I reached for it 3 times and it did not move a hair. I got out of the chair. Half a step, and I reached again. Nothing at all. Another half step. The nail turned a quarter turn on the stone and dropped flat. Sweat came up along my hairline. The lamp flame did not so much as lean. One more half step, and it came off the sill into my palm. I got a cord out of the drawer and measured that spot to the chair. Then I measured it again because I wanted the first number to be wrong, 3 meters. 3 meters of true control, and only 3. Asked that. I could feel the iron and do nothing to it whatsoever. 10 meters of sense. 3 meters of hands. That is the same as being able to see a locked door. I wrote the number down. Then I made myself write the other one. The night I forged 4 barrels, I did not sleep for 2 days afterward. I have never told anyone how close I came to going off that platform at dawn. 4 barrels cost me everything I had, spent in 3 hours, 90%. 9/10 of every scrap of power in my body for 1 night of work. I spent 11 days getting it back. I lifted the sheet for a while. 200 men had died in the canyon. 40 chiefs had gone quiet at my gate. And I had 3 meters. Halden could throw a lion into the ground. I could not move a nail from a chair. Halden knocked and came in about an hour after that. That is the sort of luck I do not deserve. He had a cloth bundle in his hand. He put it on the desk and unrolled it without any ceremony at all. 3 crystals. Dull, cloudy, roughly the size of walnuts. Low grade. I know that now. I did not then. Cores, he said. The hunting parties have been bringing them in since the spring. Those are the worst 3, which is why I brought them before the good ones. He shrugged. The scholars say a man absorbs a core over weeks. Sit with it. Meditate on it. Take it in slowly. How many weeks? For a low grade? 6, perhaps. Do not be disappointed if I picked up the first core. The stone in my shirt had been quiet all night. The instant the crystal touched my palm, the pocket over my chest went hot. The core died in my hand. Gray went out from the center and reached the edges in half a second, the way a coal goes when you take the air from it. Then it lost its corners. Then it lost its shape. Then it was not a crystal at all. It was powder, gray and fine, running out between my fingers. It ran off the edge of the desk and down onto the floorboards. I did not catch any of it. My hand was empty and clean. There was a pale drift of it across the toe of my boot, and that was the whole of what was left. 6 weeks of sitting and meditating, and it had cost the stone less than 1 breath. Halden sat down in the other chair. Nobody had offered him the chair. That was 6 weeks, he said. I pulled the cinder stone out and held it under the lamp. The veins across it had changed. They were deeper. They had sharpened. There were finer lines branching off the main ones that had not been there at supper. 2 cores left on the cloth. I did not look at them yet. I put the nail back on the windowsill and went and sat down in the chair. 3 meters of floorboard, the same 3 that had left me standing there 10 minutes before, and I reached for it. It came off the stone and slapped into my palm hard enough to sting. Halden came up out of the chair so fast he knocked it backward. I got the cord out with him standing over me. We measured it together, twice. Then a third time because he did not believe the second. 5 meters now, 3 to 5 in one swallow, and it had cost the worst core of a bad batch. I set the nail out on the ledge beyond the sill and reached for it from the chair. It did not come. I was the wall now, and the wall had moved while a man watched. The two survivors of that batch sat on my desk in the lamplight. For the first time, I let myself look straight at the thing I was holding. It had never been a key. A key opens a door once. This had woken a bloodline that 18 years of tutors could not find, and it was still feeding. Every time it fed, my ceiling went up. Not a charm, an engine. And then I had the thought, and I am going to write it down because pretending I did not have it would be a lie. Rows of men in the courtyard, my own soldiers, one at a time, hand on the stone. 400 new citizens. Feed a beast core to each one and see whose bloodline stands up. An army of awakened men. I put the stone down on the desk and did not touch it again for a full minute. If such a thing existed, and one word of it left this valley, every crown between here and the sea would come for it. Not for my salt, not for my cannons, for the object in my pocket. Go! They would take that valley apart stone by stone to be certain they had it. No, I said out loud, to an empty room and one confused old knight. My lord? Nothing. Go to bed, Halden. Bring me the good ones tomorrow. He went. I sat there turning the stone over in my fingers and thinking about home, which I did not often let myself do, the way it warms in a pocket, the way it is exactly the size of a child's fist, the way it was pushed into my palm in a corridor by a boy with a missing front tooth. Keep it on you. Not in the bag, on you. I sat very still in that chair for a long time. Peo was 8 years old. This part happened at Cairn Castle, in the counting room on the east side, and I was not there for any of it. I learned it years later. I am setting it down where it belongs. The counting room, cold stone, one high window, a portrait of a boy on the wall. The accountant laid 3 years of ledgers end to end across the floor, 21 volumes, open edge to edge, from the door to the far wall. He walked that line with a candle and one finger out. 21 volumes ran the length of that floor. The accountant walked them end to end, and by the last sheet his finger had stopped shaking and reached north. Workshop receipts, year 1, every figure balances. He moved down the line and crouched. Here the money leaves. Timber contracts to a firm that owns no timber. The count stood at the end of the books and said nothing. His hands stayed behind his back. They did not move once. You what? 3 years of workshop money had left this house through those pages, and the count had spent none of it. The accountant went on down the line on his knees. Candle wax dripped onto page after page. He did not notice. He had the scent of it now. Our merchants have been north. There was a town out there, a wall, a castle, terraces cut up the slope. The man running the works is Master Dayan, who left this house 4 years ago. The count said nothing, not one word. The accountant took that for encouragement, which was the mistake of his life. It can be dealt with quietly. A road out there is a dangerous thing. Bandits, weather, a bad ford. He drew his thumb across his own throat. Nobody would ever ask. The count moved on the word. The backhand took him off his feet and threw him the width of the room. 21 ledgers went over with him. 3 years of proof slid across the stone in every direction. He came up against the shelving. His mouth was bleeding. A ledger came down on top of him. The count crossed the floor and stood over him. He did not raise his voice at all. That is my blood, he said. Say it again in this house and you will not leave it. Later, he was alone in that room with the door shut. The portrait was a boy about 6 years old, painted badly, in a good frame. The count stood in front of it a long time. 41 branch families, and every one of them had sons who moved stone. Not one of them would have left a bloodline dead firstborn on that seat. He gave his steward 2 orders that evening, about 9 words in total. The northern caravans doubled inside the month, and no driver was ever told why. Wagons that had run east now turned at the fork. Salt, grain, iron stock, all of it north. 3 years of missing funds dropped out of the books in one night. The steward burned the loose pages in the counting room grate himself. He worked until dawn. The theft had never happened. Then the count went to bed. As far as I knew for a very long time, my father had thrown me out of his house with nothing. I rode east with Vance and Halden about a week after the cores. 3 men, no banner. I wanted to see what was on my own road before something on my own road came to see me. Alderwatch is 4 days out. It is a palisade town, and I use the word generously. split logs, leaning, a walkway rotted through in 2 places, 600 people and a muddy market, 2 goats on the roof of the smithy which nobody seemed to think required an explanation. Their lord came out to meet us himself, which told me most of what I needed to know. Blunt, stocky, about 40. His coat had been a good one 10 years ago. He was already smiling before he had the name. Rowan, I said, of Iron Hollow. That is not a house. No, before it, Cairn. He laughed out loud and hit me on the shoulder hard enough to move me. Vance put a hand on his sword. I put a hand on Vance. Ostrell, third son of a family you have heard of. They sent me out here at 22 with a writ, 100 men, and a letter wishing me well. He was still grinning. Nobody arrives here on purpose, boy. Everybody out here was thrown away by somebody. The feast was 3 tables in a hall with a low, smoky ceiling. The ale was genuinely bad. He drank 4 cups of it and set the 4th down half full, and the grin went off him with it. 4 villages had burned in 5 months, and 2 of the ashes were his. He counted them off on the boards with the base of the cup. 1 wet ring for each. After 4 rings, and the hall had gone quiet around them. They come at dawn, they take grain and people and burn the rest. Tribes take herds, these take people. Who? Gravehounds. He said it with no drama at all, which made it worse. They never raid the same lord twice in a season, and they are run by an awakened knight. Halden set his cup down. He is not a man who sets a cup down. He counted it out on the table between us. 200 raiders, perhaps 300, and only one of them needed to be awakened. You are certain of that, Halden said. A carter of mine watched a man walk through a barred door, not open it, so no, I am not certain, but I believe my carter. What do you want? I said. He put both hands flat on the table. He stopped, turning the cup. Mutual defense. You are attacked, I ride. I am attacked, you ride. He tapped the boards twice. There are 4 of us out here holding writs and no protection, and we are being eaten in the order of our weakness. I did not answer for a while. I did not need Alderwatch. I had a canyon, 4 unloaded cannons, and a reputation working better than the cannons ever had. Signing meant obligations, called at a time I would not choose, on ground I did not know. It also meant the first man on that frontier who was not one of my own. Yes, I said. We did not shake on it that night. We argued. He opened wanting the muster with no ceiling on it at all. 3 days of argument dropped that ceiling to twice a year, in writing, and by the end of it he had stopped smiling and started respecting me instead. The salt went back across that table 4 times before it reached a favored rate instead of free. He shoved it at me. I shoved it back. On the 4th pass he wrote the rate in himself and swore at the pen, then 1 clause with no exception in it at all. Neither of us signs anything with the Gravehounds, ever, under any pressure at all. 60 men inside 12 days, no more than twice a year, no obligation across the border. That is what 3 days of arguing cost him. He signed it. I signed it. Allied lords on that frontier my whole life to that afternoon? None. One now in his ink and mine. Then I did not turn for home. I turned the other way. I turned north instead for Coldgate. That is the Crown's border fortress and the only registry office in 400 miles. There was one thing my valley did not have, and no amount of iron was ever going to make it. Iron Hollow was fed, Iron Hollow was armed, Iron Hollow was profitable, and Iron Hollow did not legally exist. The administrative hall at Coldgate is a long counter with clerks behind it. A wall map runs floor to ceiling behind them. I stood and looked at that map a while before anybody served me. That map carried every holding and every registered claim in 400 miles. Iron Hollow had a wall, a smelter, and 4 cannons now, and not one mark of ink on it. I row, there is a blank place on it in the shape of my valley. Nobody had drawn it. Nobody had been told to. The clerk was a pleasant, tired man of about 50 with ink on his cuff. He heard me out and reached for a form before I had finished. Frontier certification, holding, mining rights, trade license. He dipped his pen, population, acreage, the writ, and a fee, name, Rowan. He waited with the nib down. The register wanted a house, not a boy, Cairn. He had written only 4 lines when the pen stopped. The nib stayed on the paper. A bead of ink spread out from it and ruined the form. He did not gasp. He did not go pale. He simply put his left hand down flat on the map in front of him, palm open. The way you steady a table that has started to rock. Say that again. Cairn. Rowan Cairn, holding a frontier writ of the valley at Iron Hollow. The clerk looked at me for a very long time. Then he stood. He walked to the end of the counter. He did not hurry. He unlocked a drawer with a key. He took off a cord around his own neck. There was one thing in that drawer, not a stack. One. He lifted it out with both hands the way you lift something hot, a folded directive on heavy paper, a wax seal the size of a fist. It was not the fortress seal. I had spent 18 years in a noble house, and I had never seen that seal on anything. That paper had been sitting in the drawer 3 years, and only one man in the hall carried the key to it. Fennec. That is my name, my lord. He set it on the counter between us. I would like you to remember that I did my duty and nothing else today. The clerk turned the seal toward me and put one finger on the name. Every certification under Cairn goes across the governor's desk now, personally, and the governor has been waiting 3 years to...